Absolutely perfect, homie.
Yo, welcome to episode 6 of this DIY Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van conversion series. If you are new here, well, I have been working on converting this brand new 2022 4x4 Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van into an off-road capable mountain adventure camper van. Most of my videos are averaging about 4 to 5 minutes, so if you want to go ahead and watch the first 5 episodes and then come back to this one, go ahead and click right up here and you'll be able to binge the entire series. In today's episode, we are going to be installing our dual Maxxair fans, our diesel heater, and we're also going to go ahead and mount the undercarriage water tank. So gear up and let's get after it. The first thing we needed to do was to measure where we wanted our Maxxair fans to go. Thankfully, there's 2 pretty obvious locations in the front and back of the van, and these made perfect sense for us, so we went ahead and mounted them in those areas. We also used some handy dandy trim rings we bought, as well as some underside trim rings we made to provide a nice mounting point for these fans. These 14-inch by 14-inch squares made it easier for us to find the center of where we wanted our fans to live, and once we got a good idea, we went ahead and drilled a small pilot hole. Then I jumped on the roof and used the adapter pieces to trace out where I wanted these fans. Now, a quick side note, these adapter pieces can be found in the link in the description down below. This link is an affiliate link, so by purchasing through it, you're going to be helping out this channel and future builds we have planned. So, just a quick disclaimer there. Once I had it traced out, it was time to lay out the tape and begin cutting. After I cut out the piece, I made sure everything was lining up the way I liked it. Then I sprayed the cut edges with some Rust-Oleum paint, and after that, we placed some liquid nails on the bottom of the adapter ring and the top of the underside ring we made out of wood. And they do make an underside piece that I will also link down below, but we just didn't see it when we ordered ours, so we just used some of the wood lying around to create our adapter piece. After we had the glue set, I took some clamps and clamped the 2 rings together, pinching the metal in between. After that, it was time to take the screws provided in the Maxxair fan installation kit and screw the flange ring to the adapter pieces we mounted. After a bit of drying, we went ahead and used a ton of flex sealant to ensure there would be no leaks inside of the fan in the future. I then screwed the fan unit to the flange piece and sat back to admire my work and to try and get rid of the burning, numb feeling rushing through my legs. From there, it was time to go ahead and repeat the entire process on the backside in a nice 120-degree summer day. And for those of you wondering, yes, the van gets very hot, and yes, it does burn your hands. So, it was very fun navigating that during this installation. With the S-bar heater, which is why I linked it, because the way their wiring harness comes for their controller is a lot better than the one that came with the Plan R, in my opinion. You're going to see later on that the wires were way too short, so I had to do some modifications, as you would say, to make sure that the controller would reach its final resting place. Like most of the diesel heaters I've seen online, this one comes with a nice rubber bottom that can be easily removed to be used as a template. But first, I had to go ahead and remove the passenger side seat, which required me to disconnect the chassis ground battery to ensure I did not throw a code when I unplugged the seat from the electronics. Once I had the seat removed and had the box exposed, it was pretty clear to see that there was a nice pocket for our heater to be mounted to. I went ahead and used the rubber piece and a silver Sharpie to mark my holes, and then I went ahead and drilled out all of the holes. But because I wasn't paying attention, you just get to watch a nice close-up of my head. So sorry about that. I then placed my diesel heater and went to the underside of the vehicle where a ton of unusable audio was created from my persistent cussing at various objects and tight spaces. After mounting the 4 bolts provided to secure the heater, I then mounted the intake tube and placed it inside of the wheel well up and out of the way. I then mounted my fuel pump, which needed to be bolted from the top using a rubber mounting thingamajig. So after a quick break from the underpits of hell, it was time for me to make my mother proud by continuing my cussing parade on the underside inside of the van. I then mounted my fuel line in some heat protected sheathing, and by using some bolts and washers, I was able to mount my fuel line up and out of the way using the OEM nuts on the underside of the van. I decided to use these instead of drilling my own holes because they were in actually a pretty good spot, but it was hard because it is really fun to cut and drill holes in a vehicle with 35 miles on it. Now I had to use this fancy adapter piece that adapted the rubber hose that was provided with the diesel heater and the rubber hose I had to buy to fit the connector piece needed for the auxiliary fuel tap on the Sprinter van. And that pretty much went auxiliary fuel tap adapter, larger hose, adapter, smaller hose, fuel line. The links are all down below, but honestly, find your nearest AutoZone and just ask someone for help because they really had everything I needed. Now, pro tip on fitting the rubber hose over the fuel line and adapter piece: Dawn dish soap. Not sponsored, by the way, but man, was it useful. I then rolled my way back over to where the heater was and installed my exhaust tube and muffler. I don't really love where the exhaust had to end up living, but from all the other videos I see, this is where most people install it, and it was the maximum length I had of exhaust, so it made only sense to put it there. From there, I went ahead and gave myself a break and went inside to run my electrical and install the hot air exhaust port. I cut the hole for the exhaust vent to mount it to, and then I screwed it on, and then I put the tubing on the heater and then onto the port. It was then time for me to make my electrical connections, which is where the modification I mentioned comes into play. I went ahead and cut the controller harness right in half and ran some of my own wire so that the heater controller could live where the rest of the switches are going to be in this build. If I didn't do this, I was going to have to mount this control panel right next to the hot air outlet, which makes no sense to me. I then ran the main power cable to the battery bank and made all my connections, which was pretty straightforward since everything has its own specific port that connects to one another. And that was it for the heater install. So the last thing was to go ahead and venture into Mordor again to mount the underside water tank. I was able to bust out our brand new pneumatic riv nut gun to mount the riv nuts into the structural steel. I first made sure to mark where I needed to go by using the brackets provided for the water tank. Thankfully, there are OEM riv nuts that we're going to be using for one side of the brackets, which made it easier to line up and mark where I needed to drill. Once that was marked, it was time to drill and riv nut it up. I then decided to work smarter and not harder and used a jack to hold the tank up while I set the brackets around the tank and bolted everything down. Now this was actually a pretty simple install, which is why I threw it into this video. I was very thankful to be done crawling around under the van until I remembered that I have to go right back down underneath there to do the plumbing connections and run all the drain tubes, but we're not going to talk about that today because that is a future me problem. But that wraps up today's video, so if you're new here, please consider hitting the subscribe button, and if you do that, then just might as well hit that bell icon so you can be notified when I post the next video. Lastly, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button if you learned something, or if you were entertained, or if you just want to hear a montage of all the cussing I did underneath the van. But that's it for today, so I will see you guys in the next week's video.